Saturday presents, in the red corner, the undisputed, undefeated Weed Whacker Guy, champion of hurling grass and pollen everywhere. And in the blue corner, the challenger, extra strength Saturday. Eye drops that work all day to prevent the release of histamines that cause itchy allergy eyes. And the winner by knockout is Saturday. Saturday, bring it on.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
The PC gave us computing power at home, the internet connected us, and mobile let us do it pretty much anywhere. Now generative AI lets us communicate with technology in our own language using our own senses. But figuring it all out when you're living through it is a totally different story. Welcome to Leading the Shift, a new podcast from Microsoft Azure. I'm your host, Susan Ettlinger. In each episode, leaders will share what they're learning to help you navigate all this change with confidence. Please join us. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You're listening to the Animation Addicts podcast with the Rotoscopers, episode 188, Kiki's Delivery Service, to Jiji or no Jiji. Welcome to the Animation Addicts podcast with the Rotoscopers, the number one place to get your animation fix with animation addicts just like you. Each episode, we dive into the wonderful world of animation featuring Disney, DreamWorks, Pixar, and everything in between. From hilarious discussions and movie reviews to interviews with industry insiders, this show's mission is to brighten your day through our love and appreciation of animation. So hop on your nerdy couch, grab some snacks, and get ready to hang out with your animation besties because it's time to dive into today's episode.
Welcome to the Animation Addicts podcast with the Rotoscopers, Disney, DreamWorks, Pixar, Don Bluth, and everything in between. We are your hosts. My name is Chelsea Robson.
I'm Morgan Stradling.
And today we have a very special guest, our Roto Nation Diamond member, Becca Grimakova.
Woohoo! Welcome!
Thank you. Great to be here.
So if you don't know, one of our patron perks for the Animation Addicts podcast is our diamond level patrons get to join us on an episode, which is exciting because this is the very first of these that we are doing. And sometimes the patrons will be able to pick the movie. Other times it's whatever is on our schedule. But this one, we had an opening in our schedule. So Becca got to choose Kiki's Delivery Service, which I'm kind of shocked that we haven't done yet, to be honest. But so thrilled and excited to do this movie and to review this movie because it is such a classic.
With every guest on the Rotoscopers, Becca, you are very lucky because today we are going to play Catch and Fire!
Yay!
Well then, how about a quick round of Catch and Fire?
Catch and Fire? You mean me?
You're the only one with enough courage.
Catch and Fire, for anybody who is brand new, we invite all of our guests to come in and we ask a series of rapid fire questions. Basically, well, all of them having to do with animation. And it is your job, Becca, to answer them as without thinking, just right off the top of your head. This is what you choose, okay?
Okay.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Here we go. What is the first animated movie you remember seeing?
Tarzan.
Favorite cartoon growing up?
Oh gosh. Magic School Bus.
Favorite animated movie?
Beauty and the Beast.
Favorite animator or artist?
Glenn Keane.
Classic animation or CGI?
Classic.
Favorite animation studio?
Disney.
Disney or Pixar?
Oh, it's like choosing between two children. I'll say Disney.
Laika or Studio Ghibli?
Studio Ghibli.
Songs or no songs?
songs.
Which one do you enjoy better? Summer releases or winter releases?
Winter.
Tiana or Mulan?
Mulan.
Okay. And here is the final question. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Which would you rather watch? Mulan 2 or The Land Before Time 16?
Oh my gosh. The Land Before Time 16. Mulan 2 is the movie that shall not be named.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. I don't even think there is a Land Before Time 16. The one that I see is
Yes.
Land Before Time 8. I know there is that one, The Wisdom of Friends. but wow.
Oh, I think, yeah, they think there's like almost 16 of them.
Probably. You'd rather,
But
wow.
yeah, the only good thing to come out of Mulan 2 for me was the fact that Mulan and Shang got married, and that again I would have just preferred as a cute little short like they did with Tangled before they made the Tangled TV series. A lot of that movie just annoyed me so much.
Oh my gosh. So funny. I love it.
Yeah, and I have a nostalgic attachment to The Land Before Time as a series, and I have a nostalgic attachment to Mulan just as a single movie.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'm a bit more forgiving towards Land Before Time because it's already a series that I grew up with. So,
Awesome. All right. Well, there you go. There we have it. You have passed Catch and Fire.
yay!
52 out of 52! Well done!
So tell us who you are, where you come from, and what you do.
Will do. So, I'm Rebecca, or Becca, as many of my friends like to call me. I am a Canadian. I come from a really small town just outside of Ottawa in Ontario. A very small, like rural farming, agricultural sort of community. I am a pharmaceutical packager by day and an author and illustrator by night. I write mostly short fiction at the moment, focusing on strong heroines and fairy tale retellings. I enjoy writing ordinary people doing amazing things in magical lands and far off places. I actually have a short story coming out in a couple of weeks that's based off of my love for Studio Ghibli and especially the film Spirited Away. So keep an eye out for that. And I am a huge, huge animation fan. I grew up on really obscure Canadian TV series. I love Greek mythology and classical literature. Yeah.
So basically, we're going to be BFFs right now.
Yeah.
I love
Hopefully
it.
beyond just now.
Yeah. Our animation BFF. Well, awesome. Well, thanks for joining. I'm so excited to have you. And, well, with that, should we jump into our main discussion?
Let's do it.
Sounds good.
Experience a progressive lens engineered with AI from Essilor, powered by individual measurements of your visual behavior. A lens personalized to you by an Essilor expert. Discover Verilux XR Track and enjoy instantly sharp vision in motion and seamless transitions from near to far. Find your local Essilor expert today at Essilor.com.
Today, the beverage aisle looks a lot different than it used to. America's beverage companies are working together. We're delivering the options everyone wants. In fact, nearly 60% of beverages Americans buy have zero sugar. You'll find more variety than ever, including more of your favorites, now available with zero sugar. You'll also find more sizes and clear calorie information on the front of every can, bottle, and pack. We know when it comes to finding balance, the more choices, the better.
All right, so we are discussing Kiki's Delivery Service, which is a classic, and we will get into all of our thoughts about this Studio Ghibli film. But before we do, I'm going to give you some basic general information, which of course we get from all across the interwebs, Box Office Mojo, IMDb, Wikipedia, and wherever bonus materials are found. In this case, I already spoiled it. The studio is Studio Ghibli. Directors Hayao Miyazaki. He also wrote and produced this film. Release date, the Japanese original release date, was July 29th, 1989. And later it was released as an English dub in American theaters in May 23rd, 1998. This was actually the first release that Disney had done of the Studio Ghibli films. They acquired the North American rights for these films in the late 90s, and Kiki's Delivery Service was the first of these that they released. And so we'll talk about that and our early memories of this film, if at all, from the 90s in a little bit. Later, it was released on home video September 1st, 1998, and then had multiple re-releases, as all great films do nowadays, which probably we'll be seeing less and less of those as everything moves to digital and streaming. The budget was around 800 million yen, which is equivalent of 6.9 million US dollars. And then the box office was 4.3 billion yen for Japanese theaters. So we can frankly say that this was a huge, huge success for the studio. And really, when people think of Studio Ghibli, this probably is one of the top films that comes to mind. At least for me, it is. And I think I'll jump right into, our initial memories of this film. But this, for a lot of people, since this was the first time for Americans or those in Canada, North America, there was Sailor Moon, there was Dragon Ball, those types of anime were starting to come into the US in the early 90s, mid 90s. There was Pokemon. Obviously, Japanese culture was beginning to become slightly more mainstream, but the Studio Ghibli films were produced predominantly, there's so many that are from the 80s and the 90s, but it took a while for them to get to the US. And so with this being the very first one to come out in the late 90s, it really stands out, at least in my mind, because I remember seeing this, at Blockbuster. I never owned it, but because there wasn't this collection of Studio Ghibli films available yet, there was really just this one. And for me, just seeing the name of this was very unique, and then cover with this girl flying on a broomstick, it always was something that really captured my attention and I was interested in, but I don't believe I ever saw it initially during the 90s. What about you guys?
I also never saw this.
Yeah, I don't think I saw commercials for it, I think. But I actually didn't really get into Studio Ghibli until I was in high school, and friends of mine really got me into Japanese animation. Before that, I mostly grew up on just like regular Disney and Pixar.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in the 90s, I think I was a very, very wee small tot. So, yeah, definitely it wasn't, and being in a very rural community too, like Japanese culture and sort of our Western fascination with it hadn't really come to my area yet.
Right.
I do remember seeing the cover. I remember the name. I always kind of confused it with another movie that I can't remember right now. And so I was like, had I seen this? Have I not? I don't remember. And as I started watching it this time, I was like, yeah, nope, never seen this. All right.
Mm-hmm.
But I do always, the name itself, for whatever reason, sticks out in my mind. Like Kiki's Delivery Service. Like, it's an interesting name.
Right.
So I was like, all right.
Yeah, and I was actually looking at the Wikipedia as I was preparing for this, and I just thought there was a funny fact. Normally they'll give the box office reception and how well it did, and the release, and it just mentioned on here that it was when the week that it had come out on VHS, that it was the 8th most rented title for that week. Like, wow. I mean, I guess for such a unknown sort of film at the time, that was a big deal, but normally that doesn't even make your Wikipedia page. Like 8th most rented of the week. Maybe like 8th most rented of the year you might see, but of the week,
Right.
I personally got a kick out of that. I'm like, okay. But yeah, it did go on that VHS release to do over 1 million copies. And so even before we get started, let's talk about the voice cast of the US version. The one that we're most familiar with. There was a release that was done in 1990 that was not associated with the Disney release, I guess. It was Streamline Pictures and Tokuma. But Kiki in the 1997-98 version, which they kind of recut later on to make more akin to the original production. And that's something that we actually do see from these films and series that were brought over in the 90s versus now, is in the 90s, they really changed a lot of things to make it suitable for an American audience or just to make it relatable, because this was such an unknown, this asphyxiation with Japanese culture by Americans and North Americans was not necessarily what it is today. And so they're like, oh, well, I'm not sure they're going to like it, so we need to change these things so it works for our market, which obviously still happens today. But at the time, they did it a lot for Japanese anime, and we see here, which we'll talk about in a second, or definitely there's a big change at the end. I think of in Sailor Moon, Sailor Uranus and Sailor Neptune were lesbians, and that was too much for Americans at the time, and so they changed them to just be cousins, which really kind of changes the whole dynamic between the two. But that's just an example of, something that happened, which now when they go back and they redub, like most of the time they really don't touch it. If they're going to dub it, they try to keep it as pure to the original script as possible, which I do appreciate, because this is Hayao Miyazaki's film. I want to see his film. I don't want to see the Disney-fied, Americanized version of it. So anyways, I that was kind of a tangent, but you might know some of these names, which Kiki was done by Kirsten Dunst, who was young at the time, but not that young, because she very quickly in 2000, 2001.
Well, at the same time, she had done Anastasia as well for the voice.
Oh, yes.
The voice of young Anastasia.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Like Chelsea said, she was Kiki, she was Anastasia, and then just a few years later, she was in the Spider-Man series, and that was a really, really big role for her. And then Jiji, this ultimately breaks my heart. You can hear it right away if you're a fan of him, but Phil Hartman does the voice of Jiji. I'm such a big fan of him from The Simpsons. He did so many characters for The Simpsons, and tragically was killed by his wife, which is just, I don't even want to think about it, because he was just such a talented guy. And this was his last voice acting role that he did before that happened the year following.
Oh, really?
Yeah. A few other notable people in the cast was Tress MacNeille, who they very much tapped the voice actor pool in this case. She's best known as Dot in Animaniacs, Babs Bunny, Tiny Toon Adventures. She's the current voice of Daisy Duck. She just has a very, very distinct voice, in my opinion. She's 69 right now, which is crazy. And she's going to be like June Foray and keep voicing characters into her 90s. But I absolutely love her. And the only other notable name that I'm going to talk about is Matthew Lawrence did Tombo, who is the young boy. And I know 90s girls might know him as he was in Boy Meets World and Mrs. Doubtfire. He was kind of American heartthrob in the 90s, not JTT level, but he was one of those.
Who was JTT level?
Speaking of, where did he go? The rise and fall of JTT. That's for another episode.
Yes.
Maybe patron only podcast. We can talk about that.
The rise
it's totally off tangent.
We could do like the rise and fall of our favorite voice actors, because
that's true.
He was on there.
Ooh, that'll be interesting.
So there you go. That's our little voice acting tidbit. Chelsea and I personally love talking about the voice actors and find it really fascinating, but that's not what we're here to talk about. We are here to talk about Kiki's delivery service. So let's jump right into it, shall we?
Let's do it.
Presenting a very special animated movie only on video.
You'd think they'd never seen a girl on a broomstick before.
Kiki's Delivery Service. She's a teenage witch.
My name's Kiki.
With a very special talent.
Do you think maybe you could teach me how to fly?
Together with her talking cat, Jiji. Kiki sets out on an enchanted adventure that will sweep you off your feet. Kiki's Delivery Service.
Smile so we make a good impression.
On sale now. Rated G.
90s were all about witches. We had Sabrina, we had Kiki's Delivery Service. I mean, Harry Potter came to be during the 90s. We just have this obsession with kind of witches. And I think that's one of the reason why, I mean, this is like a harmless witch for sure. There's definitely the scarier witches out there. But as far as, you know, those marketed to children, they're usually more tame, you know, happy. They're a good witch, right? They do good things with their powers. And I thought that was one of the things that really made this film stand out to me or appeal to me so young when I initially, you know, became aware of it, was just that it was like this girl riding this broomstick, and it just looked so fun and whimsical. And that really is the word that I would use to describe this film is whimsical.
Yeah, I can see that for sure.
Yeah, I remember seeing the trailer and like thinking about how fun and whimsical the movie was going to be. And then as we got further on into the movie, it sort of surprised me, like the darker turn it took, and especially towards the end.
Oh yeah.
I felt like this was a very interesting character arc, because she starts off, Kiki is a 13-year-old girl, and it's time, I guess, on her 13th year sometime, like whatever full moon she chooses, I guess, decides to leave her home and must leave her home for a year and become her own witch somewhere else. And generally speaking, it's going to be in a place that's more, I mean, she ends up choosing a place, at least, that is not as superstitious, maybe, like doesn't have as many witches around, even though she like runs into a witch on the way there, which I thought was odd, because they never brought her back. I was like, come on, bring in more
snotty McSnot face.
Yeah, like, why aren't we bringing in more of these witches? I want to see all of them. But I felt like that was, first off, interesting, because I mean, you look at our today in age, children aren't normally considered adults, or it's not their chance or expected to leave their house and take care of themselves until like 18 or something like that. And
even then, some parents may say, no, you're too young,
right,
stay with me.
Right, exactly. Well, and then you have, but I mean, you look at 100 years ago, and people were at 13 definitely leaving their house and doing their own thing and living a life. And I've seen other like coming of age type movies where it's like their parent had to send them away to work for somebody, you know? And so it's like, it's interesting looking at it from this perspective of, no, you're not ready to leave the house until, you know, forever. And this, leaving the house at 13, like, whoa, weird.
Yeah, it's not a totally unheard of concept, you know, leaving so young. And actually, if you look up the origins of the term teenager, it's not necessarily a word that existed until just recently, you know, within the last couple hundred years, if not, you know, last 100 years. And it's really because when they became teenagers, they essentially, in the olden days, because you didn't live that long, let's be honest, you were an adult and you were expected to take on those duties, where now we really do baby our teenagers. Like, it's your fun years, just enjoy it. And so I agree with you. Initially, when you're thinking the movie's going to be this one thing, you know, witchcraft, and she's flying on this broom, whatever. And the witchcraft elements are kind of really pushed to the side. There's not a lot of focus on it. She doesn't actually do magic in any way other than flying.
Yeah.
But the very beginning, you're not know what to expect. And then suddenly this young girl, at least from our perspective, is leaving home, and she's flying the nest to, you know, go spread her wings and learn. You know, it's almost like she's going to boarding school, except for totally not, because she has to figure it all out on her way, which is, it's kind of jarring for a modern audience where this isn't really the norm, at least in North American culture.
Right.
You know, maybe other cultures that is the case. But so I actually really like that, because it really spins and puts this world on its head. You realize, okay, we're not in Kansas anymore. We are in an entirely different era, world. It's supposed to be set somewhere in Northern Europe. You know, not necessarily a real place, but it's meant to look like Northern Europe. That's what the book kind of established it. And then it's not necessarily olden days either. I mean, there's planes and there's more modern technology. And so there's these, and then at the same time, there's these witches and they're kind of relics of this old world that are still around and still, you know, being witches and following that path. So yeah, from the very beginning, I think it's just an interesting juxtaposition of the modern world and what we're expecting, and then her going off and she's so confident in where she's going. And at the same time, the parents are slightly reluctant because they're like, "Oh, it's already here. You know, my little girl grew up." But at the same time, they just accept it because that's part of what happens and what you need to do to grow up. And so we see this theme of, you know, leaving childhood behind throughout. And this really is her journey of doing that. The Kiki at the very end of the film is completely different than the Kiki at the beginning, who thought she was pretty grown up, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I loved her parents. I thought for the little that we saw them that they were very interesting characters, and I was actually really sad that they weren't in the movie more.
Yes.
So it's very refreshing to have such a healthy, like, parent-child relationship in an animated movie. They're sort of hard to come by,
Right.
as you know, we all know from Disney films.
Right.
How can we make this more dramatic? Okay, kill off one of the parents. That's always the go-to. But in, you know, Ghibli world, it's different, and I like that it seems nearly all of their films take their time and just let us explore the characters at a slower pace than other films. I was thinking of other films that we reviewed recently, and I was about 15 minutes into the film, and not much had happened. We were introduced to her parents. She finally left, and she was flying away. You know, that was about it. And you know, still the plot wasn't totally, you know, go, go, go. Whereas other films like we've done recently, like Shrek 3, 15 minutes in, we were way barreling down the road.
Yeah.
So many characters were introduced, lots of plot lines. You know, they were already getting ready to go on another subplot. So it was just interesting and definitely a breath of fresh air, having watched so many American films recently, to just be able to take time and breathe. You know, that opening scene with Kiki where she's laying in the grass and listening to her radio, and you just see the different pieces of grass that are blowing in the wind, and she's just kind of relaxing and enjoying her last little bits of childhood, if you will. And I loved it. And the movie continues at that pace for the majority of it.
It reminded me a lot of The Sound of Music, the opening, where
Yeah.
she's just in the hills, and I almost expected her to get up and start dancing around.
Which would have been awesome.
I really liked the music in this. The opening song was really fun. I was like, well, dang.
So, Kiki's was based off of a novel by, I hope I don't mess up this name, Aiko Kadono.
Good enough.
And a lot changed. Perfect. And they made a lot of changes from the original novel. Miyazaki wanted to insert his own brand of drama. He really wanted to focus on Kiki's journey from childhood to womanhood. So he added the airship incident that occurs at the end of the film and Kiki's dramatic loss of magic. Kadono was not pleased with the different changes that were introduced, and the project actually almost came to a complete halt when it was still in the script writing stage, I believe. So Miyazaki pulled a Disney and went to Kadono's house to get the author to come to the studio, learn a bit more about the project, and eventually they got her blessing to continue, and he helped save the project so it could be made into the film that we know today.
So
very interesting.
Which I thought.
So wait, she didn't lose her magic at all, and there was no airship. That's a huge difference. That is not like,
oh yeah,
just the cat was black versus white, you know.
Yep, it was very much an episodic sort of novel that Kadono wrote. It was very like more slice of life, and it was more about Kiki going around and making friends with the people that she delivered goods to, and she didn't really come across any sort of hardship. There was more focus on her, goodness of heart, and yeah, basically, I guess just making friends and very, very light and sort of fluffy fare. But I sort of would be interested to read that because I love slice of life. I love very relaxed stories. And that's sort of part of the reason why I love some of Studio Ghibli's movies, is that it's exactly that. It's very relaxing and breathable. So, and I even found Kiki's for the most part that way. So it was very interesting that Miyazaki was like, this is going to be full of drama.
Also, at the same time, totally not surprised that he wanted an airship in there.
Yeah.
It feels like that's just his
Yes.
thing. Anything with aircrafts, he's gonna find a way. Totally. Good times. Yeah, and you are an author, and this happens a lot where the rights of the film get purchased by different studios. And very rarely does it stick to the source material. The studios want to change things, make it more exciting, make it better for film. And you either have to deal with it, or you have a very animated and vocal author who kind of steps in. But seems like it all worked out in the end,
And I was going to mention how it's possible for those changes to occur, but it's nice to have. I like to look at it as the novel is one thing and the movie is a whole other entity unto itself. So you can appreciate both without, fans of either sort of going at each other's throats. Because sometimes that happens where, people are like book or film, and it's like, like with Howl's Moving Castle, I have friends that absolutely love the book, and I have friends that love the film. And sometimes it can get a little bit hairy when you're discussing it. I love both. I think I lean more towards the film because of the utter beauty of the animation, and the music is just gorgeous. But I have other friends who prefer the comedic whimsicality of the book, and I'm like, both are good. Both is good.
There is room in the world for both. When you bring books to movies, many times you're introducing it to an entirely new audience that previously would never have any idea, especially with this being a Japanese book. I don't think any of us would necessarily know about this, or be, you really have to dive deep in, to Japanese culture to find it probably. As a result, we're talking about it now, which I'm grateful for, and which makes me kind of want to go and find the original book and then read the source material now.
Yep, same. And it's like that with, Winnie the Pooh. It's very different from the original books. And I love both as well. But the original books are so, for children's books, they're very adult with some of the humor and the way the animals treat each other. So it's interesting to think these things that we think of as just children's books or children's movies or whatever, it's much there's a much wider audience often involved than one would first think.
Yeah, absolutely.
I thought just the whole arc of that those events added for Kiki were really just changed her. It really made this a story. Because it was just interesting how it starts out with her having enough confidence to go out, and she's capable of flying, but apparently only just because her mom says, "Oh, she only just she only just learned, and here, take my
student
driver.
Right.
take mine."
But it's old.
Take my broom.
Ageism.
Right, ageist over here. And I was...
and then we see her nearly derail, fly off course, trying to just get out of her house. She's banging into trees. Oh, miss those bells. I'm like, oh man.
I bet her parents are like, why did we let her leave? I don't know.
Yes.
Probably expecting bills for damages in the mail.
Right. But I just okay, so she starts out with this confidence, and then it starts going on, and then she realizes now that she's made this one talent of hers a job, because other witches have other talents as well, but she only has the flying part. I feel like she left too soon. I feel like she should have stayed home. Should have gotten her studies done. Started working on those potions or even something else.
Stay in school.
Right. Come on now.
Right. Not just 2 weeks after you learn how to fly, and that's your only talent.
Right. So,
if you can call it that. Which I guess
And
she can
talking
fly
to
and
a
others
cat.
can't. So it's a talent. It's real.
oh yeah, no, totally. And then later on, she says oh, flying used to be fun before I made it my job. And I was like, oh, that takes you back to the book, The E-Myth. Yep, that's really what it is. Basically, the book, The E-Myth, talks about how a lot of people, they start businesses based on what they like to do rather than the actual knowledge of knowing how to run that as a business. And then the
Yep.
fact that they like to do it turns it into a job, which means they no longer like to do it. And so that basically happens to her. She ends up getting to the point where she doesn't like doing it anymore and then somehow forgets. Like, that was weird. Like, I wasn't quite sure why she could no longer fly on her own.
I really actually loved sort of that part. And for me, being an artist and an author, I equated it to like artistic burnout, where, she's sort of forgotten or lost her will to do so, like subconsciously, because she's not enjoying it anymore. She's lost that spark. And I've definitely had long periods of time where I struggled to write, I struggled to draw. And so her character arc through the film was very relatable for me, even if there were other issues I have with this movie. That part of it was very very emotional for me as I was watching. So I thought that was captured very well, but they could have delved a little bit more into it, I think, because not every viewer is going to come with that background. So I almost feel like Miyazaki sort of wrote this story, as much as he might say for like girls, I think he almost did it for himself to present maybe a part of himself out there that he, as like this really famous put together animator, might not be able to necessarily overtly present to the Japanese public.
No, and I 100% get that too, because I've definitely been through moments and years where you just feel very much emotionally and artistically drained. But my actual question was like, what was the impetus?
Catalyst?
Yeah, the catalyst.
I think, I mean, they even say in the movie that it's sort of like equivalent to writer's block. There isn't necessarily any one thing that causes it. It's just something that happens to us, especially as we're doing new things. And so there's this model called the Dunning-Kruger effect, and essentially it's as someone starts something new, there's two axes on this. It's your level of confidence and your level of competence, right? So when you know nothing and you're just starting out, you don't know what you don't know. And so your confidence level is super high.
Yeah.
And many times you can equate this to learning a new instrument. I'm going to paint and I'm going to be just as good as the Disney artist, or I'm going to be an entrepreneur and I'm make 6 figures in 2 months, whatever, and so you leave, you quit your job, you do your thing, and you hit the peak of confidence very quickly, knowing nothing. It's called the peak of Mount Stupid. And then very quickly, you start knowing that you don't know what you don't know, and you fall rapidly into this valley of despair, where
the pit of despair.
You still don't know anything, and your confidence now is very low. And then as you keep working on your skill and growing, there's this slope of enlightenment, as they call it, where you're gaining more confidence and more competence at the same time. And then at the very end, it's the plateau of stability. So you're finally incredibly competent and confident, but the path that it takes to get there is just a roller coaster. And I kind of think this is what happened to Kiki, is that she didn't know what she didn't know. She just went, she hit the peak of Mount Stupid, and then she flew, it's kind of a harsh name, but and then she kind of falls into this valley of despair, realizing that like, here I am, and I actually don't know a lot. And then your confidence falls in everything. And sometimes the skills that you may have gained to that point, you kind of lose them, or you don't have as much confidence in them. And so it seems as though they're gone. And so that's definitely what came to mind when I was watching it, for sure.
She loses her powers right after that little tiff with Tombo, right? Sort of that one-sided, I suddenly am angry at you because I didn't really understand that scene. Was she angry at him because he dared to be friends with a snobby girl? And then she's like, yeah, that scene at the beach was, when I was watching, I thought, was that the reason why she suddenly lost her powers? Because like this connection that she's been building with Tombo over the movie is suddenly a little bit less stable. And because then at the end of the movie, when she gets her powers back, it's to rescue him. So
that was weird. It was like, what in the world was it that knocked her off her broom, figuratively and literally? And then after that, she like even still went to go do these deliveries, and I'm like, girlfriend, you're really not gonna work. This isn't gonna work.
Yep.
So I felt like, yeah, those were all interesting. I don't know. Did I like Tombo? Like,
I'm not sure if I liked him either. I was like, I like his shirt.
Yeah, I was like, I need to get me one of those Where's Waldo shirts, man. Those are great.
Yeah, it just felt like his character wasn't very necessary except for the end, almost. Like, he has to exist so Kiki can save him. But otherwise, he just sort of felt like that annoying kid that, that's in your neighborhood that you sort of feel obligated to be friends with, but don't necessarily want to be friends with. He was, yeah. And I didn't really understand Kiki's reaction to him either. It felt like she just like had a hate on for him for no reason, because country girl meets city boy. City boy is like
infatuated,
not following the rules.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
You need to be introduced before you talk to a lady, or however she mentions it. Like, okay,
and
honey.
then she held a grudge.
We're not in the 18th century anymore. Which may be just this clash of cultures that she's used to. We do see this. She comes from a very, very small town. And even when she's up in the sky and she meets that little witch, she's like, wow, that's where you're from? She's like, yeah, it would be small to you. And it's just kind of reinforcing at the very, very beginning that like she's going to be really out of her element. And she lands in this city that is just so completely different than essentially a rural place that's kind of on old-fashioned values and more of the olden world, where she's thrown into this new world and the people act differently, the boys act differently. It's just a different way that she needs to learn and adapt and change in order to grow.
It felt a little weird because at the beginning, her and her friends are all giggling about boys, and I was sort of like, oh, like, so she's expecting to meet boys, and then she meets one, and it's like, how dare you talk to me? I'm like, Kiki,
don't we all
some consistency?
Don't we all like act like that though when we were teenagers? Is like we all had crushes, but then at the same time, it's like, oh, but don't talk to me. No, I'm gonna ignore you now because you're talking to me, but I really, really like you, but I'm not even gonna look in your direction. I mean, I get it. That's a little real.
Yeah,
but maybe not necessarily what was happening there. So can we talk about the witchcraft in this world? Because it's Kiki's delivery service and you see her on this broom and she's this new witch. But it seems like everyone in her old town either are witches or, like her group of girlfriends seem to be all for it, when she's leaving and whatnot. So you just expect the magic to be more commonplace, I guess, and more prevalent in the story, but it's actually not. There's no magic spells, no potions, none of the things that you would think when you're thinking of magic and witches. It's very, very subtle.
In essence, all of this is just their gap year.
Yep.
Like they go away for a year and then come back, and there you go.
But in her case, it's more of like an apprenticeship on her own. Like it's not just her it's not just like to hang and like see the world. She actually has to get stuff done.
Yeah.
Where it's kind of like I see it as a boarding school, but like solo, like self-paced.
Yeah.
Well, like they talked a lot about like different talents, and like each witch has a talent that they focus on and sort of grow. But then I think there's a line where Kiki's like, "Yeah, I haven't really ever thought about that." And I'm like, "Girl, what have you been doing then for the last 13 years?"
Yeah, we don't see her mom. We know her mom's a witch. She has a broom, but we don't see her do anything magical. We other than flying, we don't see anything that's happening here. And I that's very purposeful. That's a style choice to keep it in the story that we need to focus on. But at the same time, I really would have liked to have seen a lot more other witches doing what they do
Yeah.
best, but it's Kiki's story. And, then she lands in this world where magic really is kind of a thing of the past. It's not necessarily looked down on. It's just something that's different and old, but like that's cool. You can fly. And we see that with the Sono, who, the baker who the very first delivery that Kiki does, she's kind of wowed when she hops on her broom and goes away. It's not like, what the heck is happening here? But it's still an admiration for something that they probably don't see every day in this town. So just interesting.
Yeah, I was a little confused about when Kiki first arrives. Yeah, she almost gets into an accident, but then the townsfolk around her, instead of being like, "Oh my gosh, like poor little kid," it's like, "Don't look at her," sort of run away. And I was really confused about that because what was the reason for that? Nothing was really established to explain why why they would react that way. It just felt a little bit contrived almost in order to make Kiki feel, oh, like I don't belong here, like right off the bat. But I would have
Hmm.
liked a little bit more established so that moment felt a little bit more true.
Hmm.
What are some of the other themes that you guys noticed?
I was really intrigued by the lack of materialism. It really uh, stood out to me, like when Kiki's traveling all by herself, and that whole like first 15, 20, well, 10, 15 minutes where she's, traveling on her own with Jiji, and all she has is her broom and her little sack and the clothes on her back. That entire part of the movie I absolutely loved because I'm a big traveler myself, and it just really gave me nostalgic feels for
Hmm.
my own adventures. And the fact that she just, you know, she didn't need any stuff. Like she just did with what she had. She was very resourceful. That scene with her on the train and sleeping on the hay, I loved that. And it was very refreshing to have that in a heroine of a film because often like you see you gotta at least have a sword and armor and if you're gonna go slay the dragon and she's like nope, I just need the clothes on my back and that was
And a broom.
really
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
No, yeah, and something that I think is very needed. I think if you've ever I've done this thing called No Spend September, where
Mm.
essentially you don't spend anything other than your basic necessities. So it's not like the random Amazon purchases don't happen. If things can wait until the next month, just don't buy in that month. And it's crazy how very quickly you can go from feeling like you need, whether you buy or not. I think we're bombarded with messages daily, especially if you're on social media or Instagram, for example, of sponsored posts and like, you guys need to buy this. Like, hey guys, everyone's
Mm.
been asking about my face wash routine. So here are the products that I use. So, like, it's just constant, right? And we see those every day. And it's not necessarily that we buy those things, every single message that hits us, but a good percentage of people do. But doing a challenge like that, it's funny because you totally just get turned off to any of this materialistic things because it's just not a possibility. Like I cannot spend
Mhm.
this month. So it doesn't even cross like your threshold in your mind of consideration. And very quickly, just after a few weeks, you I've noticed that I just wasn't thinking about things like that, and I was very much more content with what I had than thinking like, "Oh, I just need this fun little gadget," or "This new shirt would be great." And so I like um, the opportunity that this film presents to have us see that, especially have Kiki
Mhm.
be an example of that. because it's an example and reminder to me that, minimalism is good, and we should really look at what we have and take a step back to see what's necessary. Declutter our lives, Marie Kondo our homes, and then going forward, like learning to be content with what we have. Less is more.
Yeah.
So for me, one of the themes that really stood out was like there's lots of takeaways for creatively inclined people. And one is, can a story be a story without high stakes? I know that there was an emotional arc for Kiki, but I never really felt like the movie established that it was like a high stakes sort of thing. Like it wasn't, live or die. And I think that's a good thing. Like it doesn't have to always be like the world's on the line or, your soul is on the line or anything like that. I think especially now with modern day films, there always has to be there's that feeling that it has to be like the world is on the line or nothing. And I think there can be a happy sort of medium there. And that's sort of what I enjoy as a writer, writing. I like the emotional aspects, the slice of life sort of fantasy. Not everything has to be super high tension in order for it to be enjoyable. I like those breathable, relaxing stories that allow you to just be. And then the other point, having to leave things alone so you can get your creative rhythm back. That whole scene with Ursula in the cabin, it almost felt like a therapy session for Kiki. Yeah. And that was really interesting. And I think it's especially interesting when you consider Japan. And another podcast I listened to that focuses on anime and the Japanese animation industry. It talks about how, Japan is famous for its work ethic and basically working people to death. Like it's very sad. And especially in the animation industry. So I almost wonder if Miyazaki was trying to make a note about that in a way, and how, as important as it is to produce and to bring works to life, it's more important to be at peace with yourself and to put yourself first. Like creators are just human, they're not machines. So that was really an interesting thing to see in that movie.
Yeah, I can see
Very
that.
cool.
Questions. All right, so we have final questions. What happened to the other witch? That was my question. Like, she just shows up, has her little conversation with her, and then it's like, peace out, and you never see her again. And I feel like
she was going home to a different city, wasn't she?
Oh, was she?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that was in the sky. She was like, that's my town over there, but that's not ultimately the place that she ends up. So she'd already done her like year sabbatical training, boarding school situation, and they just happened to meet in the sky. And she judges Kiki for sure and is Snob Hill. And then just, it was just, I think, not that she was a character we were supposed to focus on. Well, I did like her hair. She was just someone to introduce that, hey, girl, the real world is not, basically you're not in Kansas anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. I liked her, though, in all her snobbishness. Like, I feel like she would have been a really good sort of antagonist for a film. Like, she just had that sort of great character design, and she had a cat. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Can you ever have too many cats?
That's why I was like, I feel like you could have done a lot more. Like,
hey, that's what the sequel's for.
Okay. And then I know
they end up best friends in the end.
Oh, good. And I know that they brought back the family at the very end of like, oh, we got a letter, or a phone call or whatever it was, and they're like, oh, good. But I felt like I missed out on knowing more about the family and having them in it. So that's where I was.
Yeah, they were so endearing.
Yeah, I loved the dad especially.
Yeah.
How long did it take Kiki to write that letter? Like how many months does the film take place over? Because I was like, if it's like 2 or 3 months or something like that, and then she's just writing them a letter at the end, I feel like if that was my kid, I would be going out of my mind with worry not having heard from them, you know?
My 13-year-old. Oy.
Yeah. So what I wanted to know was what was up with Ursula. I loved her character, and when she was first introduced in the middle of the woods, the movie drops like that really amazing tidbit that the crows used to serve the witches, and then you see them on her roof with her, and it was like sort of like Jane with the little chimp baby and Tarzan trying to draw and stuff, and I was like, oh my gosh, she's gonna be like this queen of witches or something that can talk to the crows, and nope, she's just this girl who's living in the creepy woods all by herself, like it's sort of more like a horror movie setup than anything else. So yeah, I was really disappointed that they didn't do more with her, because she was such an interesting character.
She was very interesting. She was definitely a hippie type that was like, she's the type of person that says, I'm gonna live off the grid, and gets like all the things in order to not have to have anybody to like answer to, which I can respect, I'm like, go you.
I wish I had the guts to do that. Like, her little cottage was like, that's what I would retire to, like a little cottage in the woods with animals and stuff.
And I'll never talk to anybody again. Wahaha.
Except the birds. Which also freaked me out. They were terrifying.
The birds, that really was the things that nightmares are made of. Like, those birds were crazy, and they kept going after her, and then like all of them were swooping in on her. I was like, no, I can't. My anxiety is lifting right now.
Hey, it's Miyazaki. What do you expect? I mean, this isn't like Princess Mononoke levels, but this is where he's getting his start. He's just testing the waters with creepy animals, if you will. So any last thoughts before we rate it?
Can we talk about Jiji for a moment?
Oh, yes. This is very important. I think I know where you're going with this, but let's do it.
So I loved his character. He was my favorite character in the entire film. And what it broke my heart when I learned about the differences in the various versions when I was doing some research. So the first English dub, the one that I saw, they actually had Jiji speak. Yes, they had. Of course, it would be Disney,
right?
They have to make it happy.
This is too sad.
They had him be able to speak to Kiki again at the end, and because while I was watching it, I just sort of had this like sinking feeling, like without really knowing what the original Japanese ending was. I was like, oh boy, they're gonna like make him not talk to her at the end, aren't they? And then I reached the end and he talks, and I was like, phew. And then I did the research, and I learned that the Japanese version was like, let's take out your heart, throw it on the ground, stomp on it a couple times, and then spit for good measure. And it sort of almost ruined a bit of the film for me, like the enjoyment that I had while watching it. And it was such a whimsical, endearing feeling to it. And then it's like, let's take away the sort of one interesting power that you have as a witch, your ability to talk to your cat. Let's toss that to the side. It reminded me a bit of like Fern in Charlotte's Web 100%. When she abandons Wilbur for a boy. And I'm like,
it's always a boy.
So
right.
Yeah.
But I think in both of those situations, it represents sort of a loss of innocence or a moving on. With Kiki speaking to Jiji, it's not necessarily a witch thing. It's just a child thing. And so as she's gone on this adventure and she's learning and she's, becoming more and more of an adult every day, those things of her childhood stay in the past. And so she, at the end of the original version, and not the Disney-fied version, but Jiji doesn't speak. And that's really, to show the change in her character over time and just another representation of how she's grown. We actually did a patron Rotonation question on this, and we said, should Jiji talk at the end or not? And I'll read one of the responses. It's by Josella. It says, I grew up with the Disney dub of Kiki's Delivery Service. I remember Jiji talking at the end. Rewatching the dub in theaters, the ending was changed back to Jiji being silent at the end. Having Jiji be silent at the end suits the story better since it shows Kiki's maturity. She has friends outside of him. However, I'd like to see Jiji speak again just to get some closure and see them reconcile.
Yes,
I felt
definitely.
I don't know, because I was confused at that. I thought that maybe it was because she was a witch that she was able to, and therefore it was a power, as opposed to just her being a young girl and being able to speak to animals because of her desire to and understand and just be with this cat. And
But does anyone else speak to him?
no,
I don't think so.
no.
No.
But I also, at first, I thought it was the fact that he had gone and gotten to be friends with this little white cat over at the side, and it's like, oh, it's the girl, the white cat ruined him. Like, I was thinking, like, did the cat just like now he forgets how to talk because he's spending more time with this other cat? Like, I don't know, I don't understand. So I was stressed out about that. Would I do I think he should talk at the end? I think it would have been better if I would have had more of a knowledge of why he talked in the first place.
Yeah, I agree. I think without that, like, I sort of would assume that that's part of Kiki's talent. But then if it wasn't part of her talent, what is her talent? Does she have a talent other than flying, which all witches can do? It was just very like that part wasn't explained enough in order to make the rest clear. And I thought it was a little sad that, in order for her to be considered grown up, she has to stop talking to her cat. I'm like, I think the best grown ups all have a little bit of childhood still in them. So to sort of have that message where, well, hey, like, get rid of your imagination in order to grow up, like, it just felt very almost anti what a lot of Studio Ghibli films portray. Like, it was really hard for me to reconcile that this movie was made by the same guy who created, like My Neighbor Totoro.
Yeah.
It was just sort of like they're so opposite each other almost in message.
Right. All right, guys, it's the moment you've all been waiting for. The moment where we rate the film. So, guys, what would you rate Kiki's Delivery Service?
I would rate it probably 3.5 out of 5. I enjoyed the beginning part of the movie a lot. I found Kiki very relatable. I loved the whole traveling section. I found after that, the second half was a bit of a slog personally for me to get through until the cabin scene with Ursula and all the feels sort of hit me. That saved the second half for me. But just that and like the sort of disjointed feeling of a lot of the scenes, there weren't always very great, like they just sort of cut from one to the next very disjointedly. So that was a bit off-putting for me visually. So yeah, the music, the animation, the whimsicality of it, and Jiji saved this from being a lower score for me. But it's definitely not my favorite of the Ghibli films. So 3.5 out of 5.
I think I'm going to agree with you on the score, 3.5. I was trying to figure out exactly where where this fell for me. I thought the animation really was one of the most beautiful things I've seen. Like you go to the town and the town is gorgeous and you have just so many elements as you're flying through that I was like, wow, really well done animation wise. And then also, like I said, I liked the music. I liked how it weaved in with the story. The soundtrack seems like it was very well put together. Kiki herself, it was give and take. Like you said, at the first, I felt like I was in it because I was like, oh, okay, she's a witch. I'm not a wife, I'm a witch. Or I'm not a witch, I'm your wife. She had a cool buildup, like as far as who she is, what this story could be. I was asking myself questions like, what is she gonna do? It did slow down. I felt like the I felt like the ending was a little strange. Like maybe it was because it was different, but the thing that I noticed most was the arc and how it was it was a different arc in the fact that she had so much hope at the in the beginning, went straight down for a while, and then just kind of went up to I'm capable of moving on, as opposed to not having the normal 3-act structure. I mean, it is a 3-act structure, but it's not the same as in, things get harder and harder and harder. It was just more like things are great, things suck, things are okay. So, yeah, I think 3.5 is a good solid score for me.
Yeah, I'm sort of wavering between 3 and 3.5. I like this film feels very Miyazaki to me. It feels very Studio Ghibli, where I like how it goes at its own pace. It's not too quick. It doesn't necessarily have all these crazy characters in your face. It's very much of its own style and unique, very much of the studio. And it like has been said, it's very whimsical feeling, but at the same time grounded in reality. So you have these two different worlds where you have this magical girl who's kind of a fish out of water in this more realistic modern world, and it's fun to see her adventures and her delivery service and everything that happens there. But it's not necessarily a movie that's just so impactful. Obviously, there were a lot of themes that we talked about and really analyzed her character, but it wasn't one that totally grabbed me and just fell in love with this movie and was just completely raptured by it. So I guess for that reason, I'm just going to give it 3 stars just to be different.
Okay, there you go.
All right, be sure to let us know your thoughts, what you think about this film. Go to rotoscopers.com/188 and let us know in the comments there. That's where you can find all the show notes for this episode. But right now, we're going to be heading to the voicemails.
Hi, this is Melissa with a voicemail for your Kiki's Delivery Service episode. I was so excited to hear you were going to cover this movie. It's one of my all-time favorites. I first saw it on the Disney Channel back in the late 90s or early 2000s. I can't quite remember. There was a time when they showed it quite a bit, and I watched it quite a bit. I actually just watched it again this past spring, and loved it just as much, maybe even a little more, because I feel like now I can appreciate things like the gorgeous animation and just how sweet and innocent the movie is. It has such a different pace from what I'm used to seeing from American animated movies. It's slow and quiet and really takes its time to tell its story and develop its characters, and I really appreciate that. Something else I always liked from the movie that when I was a kid, which I still like now, is Jiji, the little cat. He's so sarcastic, and his remarks are always so funny. I just love that about him. And so, yeah, thank you so much for doing this movie. I really look forward to hearing what you all have to say. Thank you.
Hey guys, hope you're all doing well, and I am thrilled to hear that you are doing Kiki's Delivery Service. This one holds a special place in my heart, as this was my introduction to Hayao Miyazaki. And let me just say, this catapulted me on a whirlwind, going from Castle in the Sky to older films like not Princess Mononoke, Nausicaa, the Valley of the Wind. There we go. And pretty much every other film that he came up with. My personal favorite is Howl's Moving Castle, but we're not here to talk about that today. Let me just say, Kiki is a wonderful coming-of-age story. I love that it's Kirsten Dunst doing it, and I just love the story overall. I'm all for spreading your wings and going out on your own, and Kiki does it in a very fun way, and the characters are quirky. I love Asono. I love the cat. Tombo just... I don't know how I feel about Tombo. He kind of doesn't understand how you're supposed to meet a girl, and quite frankly, I'm kind of on Kiki's side of it's very rude to speak to someone before you've been introduced and before you know her name. So, I mean, yeah, Tombo, you need to work a little bit when it comes to the ladies. But yeah, overall, I love this film. It's great. My sister and I love to watch this on occasion. And I can't wait to hear what you guys think of it. So, yeah, that's my 2 cents. Have a good day, guys. Stay healthy.
All right, if you want to send in a voicemail for our next episodes, be sure to send it at rotoscopers.com/voicemails. Give us a call at 406-646-6575. Or we're in the modern age now. Send us a voice memo on your phone. Then send us an email, contact@rotoscopers.com, and let us know what movie you are reviewing in your voicemail or what the topic is. Just put voicemail dash then whatever movie, or voicemail dash I have a random thought about this. Whatever. We got you. That is all we have for this episode of the Animation Addicts podcast. It was a blast. First off, Becca, it was a blast having you on the episode. You are so articulate, and I loved all your thoughts and opinions. So thank you, not only for being a patron, but for joining us and picking this amazing movie.
Thank you for having me. It was so much fun. I absolutely enjoyed myself, and I'm glad I came off articulate because I feel like I ramble sometimes. So
not at all.
No, you were great. So where can people find you? You've been hinting at your work, and my ears are perked.
So I'm on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Those are my main places. So you can find me on Instagram as becca.gramakova, on Twitter at Dream of Writing, and on Facebook as well under Becca Gramakova. And I'm also very active, or try to be very active, in the patron Facebook page, and I'm there under Rebecca Borshevsky. So you can also find me there. And yeah, Becca Gramakova is just my pen name for my writing. So yes, I'm a woman of many masks.
I love it.
We will include the links to all of those in the show notes so you can find Becca directly. But then, like she did plug, if you want to interact with her even more in our patron group, be sure to check out Being a Patron. We think it's pretty cool and fun. So be sure to subscribe wherever good podcasts are found. And today's 5-star review was by Mikey INSD. So Mikey in San Diego, maybe? I do not know. And his title is Oodalali. He gave us 5 stars and said, undeniably, one of the best podcasts I've listened to. Aw, thank you, Mikey. And of course,
Oodalali.
Be sure to leave us a review in iTunes. Our goal is to get 500 reviews. We're currently at 306. So if you haven't written a review yet, go ahead and do that. Just do it. So our episode is going to be a troll in Central Park. Becca has her patron perk for being our highest tier of patron. And since she was on the episode and we didn't have anything, we asked her to pick from our list. And she chose a troll in Central Park. So we're going to get some Dawn Bluth Dazzle going and talk about that one. And then the episode right after that, it's Chelsea's birthday episode. So Chelsea will get to pick, and she will announce her pick on the Troll in Central Park episode. So get ready, guys.
Yay!
All right, guys, that's all we have for this episode of the Animation Addicts podcast. Until next time, we are the Rotoscopers.
So, do you remember what Catch and Fire is?
Yes. You might want to just go over the rules again, though, because as I mentioned to you before, I have a Dory memory. So
perfect. Okay, so
time out, Chelsea. I have a child in my room, so I'm gonna get him back in bed so you can continue without me, which is fine because you're leading this. So I'll be right back, but I'm not gonna be talking for a while.
Okay, sounds good. So
22 out of 22.
Well done.
And later it was released as an English dub in American theaters in May 23rd, 1988. This was something that Disney, they had procured the rights.
1998.
Thank you. You've been listening to the Animation Addicts podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and be sure to leave us a 5-star review. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you want to help spread the word, be sure to share the podcast with your friends on social media. Just don't forget to tag us at Rotoscopers on Instagram and use the hashtag AnimationAddicts. For all the links and full show notes for this episode, go to rotoscopers.com/podcast. Now, if you still can't get enough for your animation fix, be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube and visit rotoscopers.com for more animation news, reviews, and interviews. Thanks for listening.